been a city girl. But when my Aunt Marcy invited me to her rustic cabin for a weekend getaway, I couldn't resist. The idea of breathing fresh air and hiking through woods appealed to my recently stressed-out self. The first day was blissful. Aunt Marcy showed me around her vast property, and we even hiked up to a small mountain lookout. By the time night fell, I was tired but fulfilled. Marcy mentioned she was meeting some neighbors for dinner, but that I was welcome to stay behind and relax. I took her up on it. My legs were practically begging for a rest. She left me with a stern warning. "Remember, Lily, keep the doors locked. Lots of critters out here." I nodded, but the moment she was gone, I slid open the patio door and stepped onto the porch. The fresh pine scent filled my nostrils as crickets performed their evening symphony. Wrapped in a cozy blanket, I nestled into a chair, allowing the serenity to envelop me. That's when I heard it. A low growl, faint but distinct, reverberating through the silence of the night. My eyes darted across the darkness, straining to see past the line of trees bordering the property. I assured myself it was probably just a fox or a stray dog. But then it happened again, louder this time. A growl morphing into a disturbing howl. Goosebumps pricked my skin. This was no ordinary animal. Feeling a sudden surge of dread, I hurried inside and locked the patio door. I tried to dismiss it as my imagination, but my gut told me otherwise. I decided to call it a night. Maybe I'd feel braver in the morning. No sooner had I settled under the covers than a sharp scratching sound echoed from downstairs. It was coming from the front door. My heart pounded in my chest. I held my breath and listened. The scratching intensified, followed by a low whine and then another guttural growl. Summoning every ounce of courage, I crept downstairs, gripping my phone like a lifeline. As I approached the door, the scratching stopped. But what I saw through the peephole chilled me to my core. There, in the pale moonlight, stood what looked like a man, but grotesquely distorted. His eyes glowed an eerie yellow, and a thick layer of fur covered his body. He was hunched over, with canine-like legs and massive, clawed hands hanging by his sides. A dogman. The thought screamed in my mind. The local legends I'd laughed off suddenly felt hauntingly plausible. I stepped back, paralyzed with terror, when it let out an ear-piercing howl and lunged at the door, shaking the frame. Panicked, I ran to the kitchen and grabbed the largest knife I could find. If this thing was going to get in, I wasn't going down without a fight. Another slam against the door jolted me, but then, as quickly as it had begun, the noises ceased. Silence filled the air, ominous and heavy. For a long moment, I waited, knife poised, ready for whatever would come next. Finally, headlights illuminated the living room. Aunt Marcy was back. The moment she stepped inside, she knew something was off. One look at me, pale and clutching a kitchen knife, and her face filled with concern. "There's something out there, Aunt Marcy," I stammered, recounting the harrowing experience. With a stern expression, she went to the door and cautiously peered out. "It's gone now," she said softly, but the fear in her eyes betrayed her calm demeanor. We double-checked all the locks and eventually retreated to our rooms, but sleep was elusive. I lay awake, replaying the night's events, knowing that whatever that creature was, it was still out there, lurking in the dark recesses of the rural wilderness. As dawn broke, Aunt Marcy suggested we leave, cutting our weekend short. I didn't argue. As we drove away, I looked back at the quaint cabin, now now tainted by the terror of the unknown. Aunt Marcy reached over and squeezed my hand, as if to say, "We're safe now." But as we made our way down the winding road, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that we were not alone. And I knew, deep down, that the Dogman of local legends was horrifyingly real. I'll never know what prompted that creature to visit Aunt Marcy's cabin that fateful night. But one thing's for certain. The city never looked so welcoming, and I knew I'd never venture into those woods again. After all, some legends are rooted in terrifying truths. "Watch your back, Thomas," Jenny shouted as she fired a paintball, narrowly missing her friend, who had taken cover behind a large boulder. We were a group of 6 high schoolers playing paintball in Black Pine Forest, a wooded area on the outskirts of town known for its dense foliage and miles of great hiking trails. This made it the perfect place for paintball, except for the local legends about weird sightings and sounds after dark. Most dismissed these as made-up stories to keep kids out of the woods at night. But something about today felt different. The sky was overcast, and the wind carried a strange chill. "Derek, flank them from the right," Thomas called out as he dodged another shot from Jenny. Derek, who had been hiding behind a tree, moved swiftly and silently, like a hunter stalking its prey. He had almost gotten into position when he froze. His eyes widened. "Guys, did you hear that?" Derek looked around nervously. "Hear what?" I asked as I tried to sneak closer to Jenny's position. "That growl. It came from over there." He pointed deeper into the woods, his paintball marker momentarily forgotten. We all listened, but heard nothing. "You're just trying to distract us," Jenny said, reloading her marker. "No, I swear. It didn't sound like any animal I've ever heard." Just then, a low, unmistakable guttural growl echoed through the forest, stopping us all dead in our tracks. That's what I heard," Derek said, his voice tinged with fear. We looked at each other, our faces a mixture of curiosity and dread. Even Thomas, who usually laughed off things like this, looked worried. "Maybe we should head back," I suggested. But I could see that some part of me wanted to know what made that sound. Jenny raised her marker, peering into the woods. If someone's messing with us, they're going to get a face full of paint. We started to move, this time staying closer together, our eyes scanning the tree line. We'd walk a few steps, hear rustling leaves or snapping twigs, and then stop, waiting for whatever was out there to show itself. But it never did. It was always just out of sight, lurking in the thick woods, as if watching us. I felt eyes on me, a constant gaze that I couldn't shake. I looked at my friends. They felt it too. The growls continued, getting louder, but never closer. It's as if whatever was out there wanted to keep us in a perpetual state of tension. "We need to go. Now," Tom finally said, the bravado gone from his voice. We picked up the pace, almost jogging now, our paintball markers hanging uselessly by our sides. We were no longer playing a game. We were the ones being hunted. As we reached the clearing where we'd parked our cars, we glanced back one last time. I thought I saw something. A tall, dark figure, covered in what looked like fur, standing between the trees, watching us. It let out one final growl, a sound filled with malice and intent, before disappearing back into the dark forest. We jumped into our cars and sped off, the tires screeching as we left behind the disturbing woods of Black Pine Forest. No one spoke on the drive back, What could we say? We had all felt it, the palpable sense of menace that had stalked us. It wasn't just an animal. It was something else. Something that wanted us to know we weren't welcome in its territory. It's been weeks since that day, and none of us have returned to Black Pine Forest. The paintball markers are collecting dust in our garages, and we've taken to playing video games in the safety of our homes instead. Some days, when the sky is overcast, I think about that day and the creature that watched us from the shadows. And I wonder what would have happened if we had stayed in the forest a little longer, if the game had continued until darkness fell. Because one thing is clear, we were not the hunters. We were the hunted. And whatever is out there in Black Pine Forest is still waiting, watching for the next intruder into its territory. Birdwatching has been a favorite hobby of mine for a long time. Their delicate feathers, their lilting songs, there's just something about them that's always fascinated me. So, when I heard about a local birdwatching group, I was thrilled to join. Every Sunday, we'd head to Green Mountain Park, a sprawling expanse of forest known for its rich bird life. We'd seen all sorts of birds, from robins and sparrows to more elusive species like the pileated woodpecker and even a great horned owl once. But last Sunday was different. "Should be a good day for birdwatching," Steve, the group leader, said cheerfully as we set off on our usual trail. "It's supposed to stay sunny and clear until this evening." The sun was indeed shining, the leaves rustling gently in the wind. It was shaping up to be a perfect day. But as we ventured deeper into the woods, we all noticed that the woods were quieter than they have been. I wasn't the only one who noticed it. I saw Emily, a high school teacher, and a regular in the group, glance nervously over her shoulder more than once. "It sure is peaceful out here," Mark, a college student who had recently joined us, remarked. Before anyone could respond, someone pointed out movement in the distance. About 200 yards away, partially obscured by trees, was what seemed like a figure. It was upright, but covered in fur, and it was standing on two legs. "Do you guys see that?" Emily pointed, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "Yes," said Steve, squinting. "It's hard to make out, but that doesn't look like any animal I've seen around here before." We stood there for what felt like an eternity, but was probably just a couple of minutes. The figure didn't move closer, but it didn't leave either. It just stood there, as if watching us. Finally, it turned and slowly disappeared into the thick woods. Nobody said a word, but we all silently made our way back to the parking lot. The usual chatter about what birds we had spotted was replaced by an unsettling silence. When we finally reached our cars, Steve spoke up. "I want everyone to stop what they're doing and write down what they just saw." Afterward, we compared notes. We all saw the same thing. The descriptions were almost identical. That night, I found it hard to sleep. My mind kept going back to that figure in the woods, to its strange, almost human-like shape, and the unsettling way it just watched us. The next Sunday, only half the group showed up for our regular birdwatching outing. Even then, nobody mentioned what we'd seen, though the tension was evident. We chose a different trail, closer to the park's entrance, and while we did spot some beautiful birds, a pair of cardinals, a blue jay, and even a red-tailed hawk, somehow the magic of it all seemed lost compared to the unknown thing we